The last time we talked about the studio Punchline was when we looked at the controversial game at the time called Rule of Rose. It was a game that not only had parents worried, but also politicians. But while they were working on getting that one released over in the West, there would in fact be another game that they would eventually release to the general public, but at the same time would be a late release on the PlayStation 2. On this edition of the Uncommon Valley, we look at the history of one of the most bizarre Valentine's Day releases as we take a closer look at Punchline's Chulip. Director for the project, Yoshiro Kimura, started in the earliest days of development for the project while working with colleagues over at Love Delic to help finish with what was going to be the company's final game as LOL, or Lack of Love. This was during the beginning of the PlayStation 2's lifespan, and not many developers had much time to utilize its more advanced architecture compared to the original PlayStation 1's. It would be a true test to create a new game in the brand new console. Kimura wanted to consider any and all options from his team as he valued them like family. He even stated in interviews that it was not only challenging and interesting to program for the new console, but that they were eager to see what they could actually make on it. So he and his team went on to work for the ideas behind the concept for Chulip. When Kimura visited the Western countries and saw couples kissing in public, which was something that in Japan wasn't as common of a custom. Then while attending a party in Tokyo, many of the patrons got drunk and started talking about video games, where they would begin to jokingly say "chushite," meaning to the title's name was due in part to the first half, chu, which in Japan is what they consider the sound of a kiss, and the English word for lip with the inclusion for the Japan rendering of tulip. After deciding the title, Kimura had a conversation with Marvelous Entertainment's Yoshiro Wada about the potential to get Chulip localized to allow the world certain aspects of Japan that not everyone would get the chance to see, along with other things that do happen on a daily basis. He also wanted to highlight a more modern problem for Japanese students, with the cast being underground dwellers. Kimura also brought on Norikazu Yasunaga, who would be brought in later to help with King's story for the in-game mechanics, Ryuji Noguchi, who would help development on Rule of Rose to help with character designs, Kirifumi Taniguchi to help compose the musical score for Chulip, and even release the official soundtrack for the game in Japan under the King Records label a month after the game released. With only 1 year and 3 months of development time, Punchline would release Chulip in Japan on October 3rd, 2002, and would sell around only 6,645 copies in its first week, and would continue to drop in sales every week after that. They were determined to get more people to experience the game, so they would repackage and re-release the game 2 more times, with it being a part of the Victor of the Best selection set on April 24, 2003. And then 3 years later with the Super Best Collection on July 6, 2006. With both re-releases having also underperformed, they would set their sights on one other location that had yet to have gotten a chance to play it: the North American market. While in between the 2 re-release versions of Chulip in Japan, publisher Natsume reserved the rights to import the game to the North American release around 2004. It would also be featured at E3 that same exact year, where Natsume was also made well aware that due to it being a very obscure title to sell to the American audience, so to consider this, they would launch it with a much more low retail price that would entice some players to purchase the game in person. Natsume was looking to get it out to the general public later that year, but would receive various delays to determine a much better time frame. But the major setback for that game that it was facing wasn't because of it being obscure, but also because it was inching into a very important time in the gaming industry: reveal of the next generation of consoles. During the summer of 2005, the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Nintendo Wii would be revealed to the general public, and Chulip would have a harder time trying to get any attention from the press. It was because of this very reason that Natsume would push the game to finally get its release date on February 13, 2007, with it having a GameStop exclusivity deal in place, almost 5 years after the original release in Japan. Natsumi also stated that because of the attempt to localize the game here in the US, that Punchline was not able to make any major graphical changes to the game overall. This would in turn get the game to receive a very underwhelming response from the gaming press, with some of the biggest contributing factors being the gameplay itself. Sites like 1UP.com, GameSpot, and IGN that the progression for the game became so unclear to the point that it became overly repetitive in their experience. Even Game Informer would place it on the list for that year's worst games of 2007, with even Ben Reeves describing the game as one of the most poorly designed games that they had ever played. Chulip would go on to undersell here in the US as well, due to how many copies that they had sold around, and because of it being a late release on the PS2. Even though the game itself never sold well, majority of the Punchline team was brought over to help with the King's Story development for the Nintendo Wii that would eventually release in 2009. And still to this day, Kimura still hopes to possibly do a sequel, but in 2012, Chulip did see a re-release for the PlayStation 3 online store via digital download. And even Punchline themselves have brought revitalized interest in porting over a lot of their older classics to modern systems, including Steam. With the future being in the hands of those interested in owning a copy, only time will tell. Check out the other videos on our channel today for more obscure video gaming history. And thank you for watching The Uncommon Valley as we look to the past into the present.